What if everything you've believed in, your paycheck that feeds your family, the savings you've scraped together for years, even the number glowing in your bank account, isn't entirely real? If I told you that governments and central banks can create money out of thin air, can wipe out its value overnight, and still keep you believing in it as if it were immutable, how would you react? It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but the truth is, that's exactly the world we live in. And the turning point happened long ago while most people were fast asleep. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon appeared on American television, his tone calm, to announce that the United States would temporarily suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. Temporary and emergency, that's what he said, but in reality, the decision permanently changed global financial history. From that night on, the tether between money and something tangible was cut. The dollar was no longer a promise of gold, no longer a claim on real value. It became an empty promise, existing only because of collective faith in the word of government. And that was the start of an entirely new era, where money is no longer anchored to reality, but exists only within belief. If you want to keep exploring the truth behind the day money stopped being real and how it affects your life today, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next parts. And if this content resonates, drop a 1 in the comments. If you see it differently, type 0. Your view matters. It helps us understand you better and create videos that fit what you want. Now, to see why this matters, we need to rewind the tape. After World War II, the world was exhausted by instability and crisis. It needed a pillar to lean on. And so, the Bretton Woods system was born. The US dollar was placed at the center, pegged to gold at $35.00 per ounce. It was a brief but precious period, a time when citizens, merchants, and nations alike could plan their future with certainty. Gold became the anchor that kept the global economic ship from rolling. Inflation was contained, international trade was predictable, and trust was reinforced. But then, when everything seemed safe, the seeds of instability began to sprout. By the late 1960s, America was spending beyond what the system could bear. The Vietnam War devoured billions. Expanding social programs stretched the budget thinner than ever. Dollars were printed in ever greater quantities, but the gold in Fort Knox could not keep up. As the imbalance ballooned, other countries began to ask, is this green paper truly backed by gold anymore? Foreign governments lined up to redeem dollars for gold. Those queues at the gold window weren't just a financial scene, they were a blaring alarm. The US realized that if this continued, the vault would be emptied and global trust would collapse. And so, from a system designed to deliver stability, the world lurched toward a monetary earthquake. This was the prelude to that moment in 1971 when Nixon made the decision that rewrote history. It wasn't just an economic move, it was a shock to faith. From that moment, money no longer rested on anything tangible. It became a symbol, an empty promise unless someone still believed. And then a new chapter opened, the era of fiat money. Fiat in Latin means let it be so. Money was no longer tied to gold, silver, or any physical asset. It existed because the government declared it to exist. This was a foundational shift, from money that was backed to money that was believed. Here's the issue. Belief has no natural limit. If you hold gold, you know its quantity is finite. But when all that remains is the phrase, let it be so, the capacity to print money, issue debt, and expand credit becomes limitless. And that very boundlessness opened the door to opportunity, while quietly sowing the seeds of every danger. Now, let me take you further back, because what's happening today is not new. Think of the Roman Empire. The denarius was once struck from pure silver, an emblem of power and stability. But emperors, needing funds for wars and pleasures, began debasing the coin, mixing in base metals to mint more money. On the surface, nothing changed. Inside, the value vanished. People caught on, trust wavered, inflation flared, and Rome's money withered. That mighty empire didn't fall in a day. The dilution of trust eroded it from within. Or look to China under the Yuan dynasty. They scaled paper money earlier and larger than most civilizations. At first, it was miraculous, light, convenient, easy to circulate. Then temptation struck. Instead of taxing, emperors simply printed more to spend. You know what followed. Infinite printing, infinitely shrinking value. Trust collapsed, merchants refused the notes, and the economy plunged into hyperinflation. A vast empire was shaken because its money lost any real guarantee. The biggest difference between 1971 and Rome or Yuan China wasn't technical detail, it was global scale. By then, the USD wasn't just America's currency, it had become the backbone of the world economy. After WRI, the entire Bretton Woods framework was built around the dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. Holding dollars meant you implicitly held a gold claim. It was a shared global faith. But on August 15, 1971, when President Nixon declared the temporary suspension of convertibility, the plug was pulled on that faith. And because the world had built everything on the USD, when America left gold, every other country had to follow. There was no alternative path. It wasn't one nation changing its own rules. It was the entire planet entering an unprecedented experiment, running an economy where money is purely belief, with no anchor to anything tangible. Picture this. When Rome fell, the world still had Greece, Persia, and other civilizations. When the Yuan faltered, trade continued in India and the Middle East, but when the US, the linchpin of the global system, cut its gold tether, it wasn't just one nation that wobbled. The whole world shifted, and Yuan, wherever you live, couldn't stand apart. As the world crossed into the post-1971 era and the gold anchor was severed, the global financial system entered a brand new age, the age of unlimited credit. What followed in the 1970s told the story plainly. Inflation surged, prices climbed by the day, and the money in your pocket lost value before you could even spend it. People were bewildered, but those in power found a new medicine. They lent more, loosened money, and conjured ever more credit. What happened in the 1980s, 1990s was the birth of a new belief, monetary policy. Central banks began to see themselves as economic engineers, confident they could fine-tune interest rates, inject liquidity, and stabilize everything as if it were a machine. But reality was never that simple. Each rescue planted the seed for the next bubble. The dot-com bubble at the end of the 990-something S, when any company with com in its name was given sky-high valuations. Then the housing collapse, and the 2008 global financial crisis, when the banking system itself seemed to unravel. And more recently, the 2020 pandemic. Governments once again poured out money, printed money, all under the same old promise: stability. You see, every crisis wore a different mask, but the medicine never changed. Print more money, and the consequence was always the same: a heavier burden for the next generation. What they called stability was really just a thin blanket covering a chronic illness. When money loses purchasing power, it seeps into every meal, every home, every dream. Think about it. In 1971, 1 ounce of gold was $35.00. Today, it's over $2,000.00. A typical U.S. home in the early 1970s cost about $25,000.00. Now it's $400,000.00. Or higher in major cities. You might say, but my salary has gone up too. True, salaries rose, but did they rise faster than housing, food, or education? You know the answer: no. You work harder than your parents, you put in more hours, yet you own less. A house has become a luxury dream, retirement a constant worry, and every dollar saved seems to shrink in value before it even sits long in your account. This is the invisible tax of inflation. It's not like the tax form you file each year, but it quietly drains value from your pocket every single day. And the cruelest irony is this: the more you cling to cash, the poorer you become over time. Imagine if your grandparents left you $10,000.00 in 1971, and you kept it untouched until today. You've already lost most of its real power. Look at Weimar Germany after World War I. To pay war debts and cover deficits, they took the easy way out: print more money. At first, it looked like a miracle. Factories humming, workers paid, the economy moving. But soon, prices spiraled. People needed suitcases, even wheelbarrows full of bills, just to buy bread. Inflation turned into hyperinflation. Trust collapsed, and society plunged into chaos. Or take Argentina, a nation that has defaulted 9 times in a century. Argentines know too well their peso cannot be trusted. Instead of keeping money in banks, many stash US dollars under pillows, or now turn to Bitcoin as a lifeline. Imagine waking each morning to find yesterday's wages already worth less, prices climbing uncontrollably. Who could ever trust another temporary promise from government? The common thread in both Weimar and Argentina is this: when money loses its anchor, when reckless printing eats away at value, it's the hard-working people who suffer most. They lose not only their wealth, but also their trust and the future they struggled to build. When paper money weakens, humanity looks for another door. Today's central banks are racing to launch CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. On the surface, instant transactions, no counterfeits, no delays. But the price is steep. Your entire financial life under total control. Every transaction traceable, every dollar freezable with a single command. Can you imagine waking up tomorrow and finding your account locked, not because you overspent, but because someone decided you no longer had the right to spend? At the same time, a rebel rose, Bitcoin. Called digital gold, it answers to no government, cannot be printed, and has a hard cap of just 21 million units. In theory, it offers escape from the spiral of endless inflation, but Bitcoin is not stable. It can double in months and lose half in weeks. It's a door to freedom, but not for the impatient or the faint-hearted. So here we stand at the crossroads. On one side, the convenience mixed with absolute control of CBDCs. On the other hand, the freedom and volatility of Bitcoin. The real question isn't which technology wins, but where will you place your trust? In a system where decisions are out of your hands, or in one filled with storms but giving you control? The future of money isn't just about banks or blockchains. It's about power, freedom, and how each of us chooses to live in this new age. You must prepare, because this decision will touch every coin, every choice, and the financial safety of your family. My friend, August 15th, 1971, wasn't just a dry history date. It was the moment the world stepped through a door with no return. When Nixon ended the dollar-gold link, he closed the chapter of real money, money backed by something tangible. From that instant, we've lived in a new era where money exists only through collective belief. And belief is the most fragile, yet the only thing holding the system together. The lesson I want you to take today is this: never confuse a tool with eternity. Money isn't life's foundation, it's only a tool. When that tool loses its power, as history shows again and again, only wisdom, preparation, and adaptability will decide if your family stands strong. Don't naively believe this system will last forever. Every system built on trust eventually cracks. Your job is not to sit and wait for collapse, but to prepare in advance, diversify assets, strengthen financial literacy, and keep your mindset flexible. When illusions fade, the awake will not be dragged into chaos, but will find chances to rise higher. Remember, wisdom lies not in chasing every newly printed dollar, but in knowing its nature and making money your servant, not your master. The day money stops being real is the day you must wake up sharper than ever. I believe this video is not just about money, but about power and responsibility. When you understand that the cash in your wallet is no longer backed by gold or any tangible asset, you'll see the urgency of financial education. The wise don't put blind faith in a single currency. They diversify, they own real assets, and most importantly, they stay self-reliant. Because money may lose value, but knowledge, skills, and adaptability never do. This is where I'll end today's sharing. Everything I've said reflects my personal perspective. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or want to share thoughts and feelings about this video, please drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback and questions so we can grow together. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to help spread these insights even further.